Okay, so welcome. This is all of the blue commons and uncommons for the full Edge of Eternities set review. Here we use the Scuffle review system. Every single card has a number rating. It's going to be the average on a scale from 1 to 10. A 1 is a card you should never play. A 2 is a card you should do your best not to play. A 3 is replaceable. A 4 is something that is solid. Your deck will be largely 4s. A 5 is strong. A 6 is a card you will always play in a given color or deck. A 7 is a card that pulls you into that deck or color. An 8 is a card you'll do some work to play, whether that's splashing, rearranging your deck, finding specific cards. A 9 is a card that says, I'm this color now. You are going to be this color because you got past this card or you opened this card. And a 10 is a card you'll always play. They're very rare. They tend to be colorless cards that win the game, but they don't have to be. They'll be cards that you put in to enable. In addition to an average number rating, I also give every card a floor. That's the worst a card will be. A ceiling. That's the best a given card will be. And an amount of effort required to bridge that gap. And that effort might be build requirements, specific cards you need to pair with, maybe situationally it's only good in some decks or in a sideboard. But take a look at that effort, figure out how much you need to put in. Your job as a drafter or deck builder or player is to maximize the value of each card. That you have to try and bring each card you pick up to its ceiling. And I try to tell you how difficult that will be to make happen. So on to the blue cards for Edge of Eternities. We're going to talk about the archetypes and then the general pick orders you need for them. So in blue, up first we have blue-white twin spell. That's cast 2 spells in a turn. They're cards that reward you for playing your second spell on your turn or on your opponent's turn. So if you're drafting blue-white, the first thing you need to look for or pick are the payoffs, the cards that give you something real for casting your second spell. They're pretty rare. There's not that many of them. So if you're going to play this deck, you need to pick them aggressively. Then you need your removal. There is a lot of removal available in this set, but the blue removal spells and the white removal spells are all kind of situational, and you really do want the cheaper ones if you're trying to twin spell. So you're okay, just maybe you don't have to kill a creature outright. You can give it -5/-0 for only 1 mana, and you want that in the twin spell deck. And because you're looking for a specific kind of removal, you need to pick it pretty high. Then you need instants. The twin spell cards really shine if you can cast 2 spells on your turn and your opponent's turn, and the only good reliable way to do that is with instants and cheap ones at that. Then you need your cantrips. So if you're trying to cast 2 spells a turn and none of them are worth 2 spells or replace themselves, then you're just going to run out of cards. You're not going to be able to cast 2 spells. So cards that say draw a card at the bottom or otherwise somehow replace themselves are the best way to do that, and you need to pick them high if you're doing the twin spell thing. And it is worth noting for all of these archetypes, none of the archetypes are strict enough that you have to do the thing. You can put blue and white control cards or artifact cards or warp cards or cards that do the thing together, and you can still have a good deck. But if you're doing twin spell, this is your pick order. You get so much value and like bodies, like a lot of the payoffs do kind of win the game, so you don't need to consciously choose your win cons. If you make 6 drones, that is a way to win the game, so you don't have to look for your win con as long as you're picking up your payoffs. Flyers are a really good plan B, so you might not always do the twin spell thing, but you can be a blue-white flyers deck and it'll be very efficient. It changes what you're looking for a little bit, but you can take, so like there's a blue way to tap a creature, there's blue cards that stun things, and counter spells and card draw spells work really well if you're just hitting them in the air over and over again. That also changes the nature of your removal a little bit because you can now bounce things or tap it down or deal with them temporarily and just keep hitting them in the air until they die. And the fact that your plan B is flying and getting in there or evasive threats means that you value having a lower curve over the power of your cards. If you're playing blue-white and you are torn over which spell to take in a given pack, take the one that's cheaper, because cheaper spells are easier to cast 2 of them in a turn. Blue-black artifact control is really just blue-black control. You can do it with or without artifacts. You need bombs for this format. You're really good at digging for bombs. You don't need a lot of them, but you need something big and powerful to dig for. Or otherwise end the game. Like normally that section would say bombs or an engine, bombs or a game plan, bombs or reanimator, but you don't have those options in this set. It's just not built that way. So you need your bombs. Then your removal, you need a lot of it to play blue-black, but you have a lot of card selection, so it's okay. Normally you need some blockers, but blockers aren't always going to do it. You just got to kill the thing. There aren't quite as many end of the battlefield generate value effects. So you can do more removal, more strict destroy target creature removal. Then evasion. Evasion is a good plan B, and you're not always going to have your bombs, but I consider Alfarial evasion because it has death touch, but only while it's attacking. So you can't block with it like it has death touch. You're just attacking with it. They're not going to want to trade with it because it already generated some value for you. And then finally, your card advantage. You can pick it a little later because there's a lot of it in blue and black, but overall, you're pretty happy to have it. Figure out while you're drafting how or if you're using your graveyard. Black has a lot of ways to use their graveyard that are kind of interesting, but not always worth focusing on. And enough of the ways use the graveyard and mill you that like you don't get to splash red for that Void Gravedigger if you're milling yourself alive with your other black spells, because you can't rely on having one mountain and a lander. So it's just something to think about, and you'll start finding different paths or different cards or things that work as long as you're thinking about it while you draft. Figure out how you're valuing your flyers. The more bombs you have, the fewer evasive threats you need, the more efficient and powerful spells you have, the fewer flyers you need. If you don't have those things, you need to take flyers a little higher. And then figure out if you need to attack to win. So I do want to shout out, there's a station we're going to look at the very end of the blue cards today, which mills 4 on attack. That is a legitimate win condition, and it's fine if you can't station it and start attacking with it until really late. But it's worth noting, and it's pretty cool. I like blue-black control in this format. All right, blue-red artifacts. So the payoffs in blue-red artifacts are particularly powerful. Menin. Is it Menin or Menin? I'm gonna say Menin. Uthro's Exile. So the payoffs are very good and spread out and are hard to deal with. You gotta take them first. You need payoffs like Menin. If you don't get the payoffs, it's hard to be just a blue-red good stuff deck. So many of the blue and red spells don't actually deal with what your opponent does in the very late game, or don't do anything unless you're applying consistent pressure in the air or on the ground. So you need the payoffs. Like I think blue-red is a very powerful archetype, but I won't play blue-red unless I have the payoffs. I need 2 or 3. It's a little bit like Final Fantasy. You need Shantoto, Ultros, Emperor, Paramecia if you're going to play blue-red. But that's all you need. Everything else just happens. So if I have 2 or 3 payoffs, the artifacts will come. You need to know whether you're going tall or wide. So Menin alone is a good example. Do I want to put all of my counters onto the Menin, or do I want to spread them out among different drones? Like there's the 1/3 hexproof artifact that we talked about earlier. Being able to grow it is really strong. And that's a decision you have to make. Do you want to grow your hexproof creature, get in with it? Do you want to grow the Menin and keep it alive? There's a lot of good ways to protect it. Or do you spread your counters out, make a few drones, put counters on all of them? Like the options are there. Blue red's going to be tough to play and very interesting. Then you need your artifacts. I should say we're going to add a 5th one. So payoffs, then support for going tall or wide. If you're going tall, it's a counter spell and some protection. If you're going wide, it's the things that make drones. Then you need your good artifacts. Then you need your removal. Then you need your bad artifacts, or let's say other artifacts. And if you're only listening to this, I'm adding this to my slides, which are publicly available later. So yeah, so do you go wide or do you protect one threat? How much removal do I need? And you do have some tempo options available. And then your value can come consciously or inherently. So the card advantage, like you can get that from cycling through artifacts. If your artifact says draw a card, gain 3 life on it, and it also puts counters on things, well, you're developing value just by casting that. Or you can play spells that are draw 2 cards, draw 3 cards, but they end up being fairly different decks. Oh, great point. So Carl says you could just play blue-red control. I don't think blue-red control is a viable thing in this format. And let's talk about that. So blue-red control doesn't work the way that blue-black control works because there aren't good ways to permanently deal with a threat. So like the blue removal spells are excellent in this set. There's a 4-mana tuck a creature, there's 4-mana, there's the 1-mana lock creature down, there's 4-mana grab a creature, and then the red has excellent burn spells. Red removal is really good. There's 1-mana deal 2 or 3, there's 3-mana deal 4 at instant speed, but the threats will eventually become large enough that you can't deal with them. Blue-red isn't good enough at dealing with them permanently in order to be a control deck. Carl, I absolutely believe you can do that. I just don't think it's a good plan to go into the draft saying that you want to do it. Like, if you're going to be control, blue-black does a lot better because it can exile the creatures. And blue is a really good supporting color for a control deck, but you need ways to deal with your opponent's 10-10. Like, if you can't deal with a 9-9 reliably, you'll lose. And that doesn't mean that you can't have controlling elements. Like, the thing is, if my opponent, let's say hypothetically my opponent has a large station, let's say, yeah, actually a station in a 9-9, the station flies, it hits hard, it's an 8-8. If you have your own threats, you're playing tempo. And if you have bombs, like if your bombs are good enough, there are big enough bombs, you can make it work. But like if I tuck and tap and then my opponent frees it, and then I take it and then my opponent frees it, and I tuck it and they cast it again, and they get to raise dead every time they do that, and then still have a 5/7, they will eventually outgrind me, even with no card draw. And this is not a like, that's not to say all of those cards are good or even their deck is good or that control can't work. It just means control can't work without the ability to permanently answer a threat. And there are ways to permanently answer a threat in blue-red at rare, and there is one good uncommon way to do it. But you will win if you're attacking for 4 in the air every time you reset their card. So I'm just letting you know, like, hard control doesn't work so well. Tempo control is really good. Clearing a threat and attacking with Menin works really well. But don't draft hard control blue-red, or you can splash black. Blue-red, actually, you can splash any color. Blue-red splashing any color can be hard control. And then finally, we've got blue-green ramp. It's kind of interesting. Like, people get upset when it's like, oh, graveyards are back, ramp is back, blue-black is control. I love seeing new takes or interesting ways to play an old archetype. So blue-green ramp, this is interesting. We have an interesting way to play blue-green ramp because we've got landers just attached to stuff. And so blue-green ramp ends up being more about making the time to crack your landers, because that's a time cost. Like, this isn't 2-mana 2/2 get a land. This is 2-mana 2/2 get a land clue. So we want to we have to create that tempo. We have to create the time to crack our lander. And if we can create enough time to crack 3 or 4 landers, it becomes pretty easy to pay for a really big cost or a really big spell. So the first thing you need are ramp spells. I think there's only one spell that ramps that isn't a lander. But landers are really important. You need all the landers you can get in blue-green. Then you need your blockers. There's a lot of good blockers available. There's a few death touchers. You just have to make sure you have them, because if you can't discourage attacks, then you can't, like, you need to both discourage the early attacks and be able to deal with the space stations, because when you're discouraging attacks without applying pressure, your opponent is just going to station. And that's okay. That's a cool aspect of the format, but it's something you need to be aware Then you need your payoffs and monsters. So Biomech and Engineer is the best card for this deck that I've seen, both just because it is ramp and blocker and a monster and a payoff. Green does have some really cool defensive tools, Carl. And then finally, removal. You just don't need as much removal when your threats are outclassing your opponent's threats. You still need it, but it's a lower priority than the other three. It helps to figure out whether you're doing giant spells or giant abilities. And those are usually going to be the same, but there's a few cards that care about abilities and a few cards that care about spells separately. Figure out what's worth splashing. This is a set and a deck that can splash anything that costs 6 mana or more and nothing that costs less than 6 mana. So if I am a blue-green lander deck and I have 5 things that make landers, I no longer care about the color of things that are 6 or more mana, at least for the first 1 or 2. Like, it's so easy. It's trivially easy to splash 2 white cards with 1 plains and 6 landers. And then figure out where you're weak. Figure out what's killing you. Are you going to die because your opponent has gone white and is putting out a ton of creatures? Are you going to die because you can't deal with 1/10/10 Trampler? Are you going to die because you can't deal with your opponent's giant flyer? Because the tools that green has access to are so specific. Like, the difference in your, if you figure out that you're losing because you can't beat an army, then you need a little bit of life gain and maybe some counter spells to deal with your opponent's big anthem at the end. If you're losing because your opponent has 1 tall flyer, then you need to make sure you have a few small reach creatures or an equipment that grants reach. If you're losing because you don't have enough threats, then you need to prioritize picking up hexproof triggers or counter spells to keep your big threats alive. You're not losing because you're going to run out of things to do, but you will lose to specifics. So being able to disenchant at a key turn, or just shatter an artifact, or counter the spell because you knew that that was a weakness of yours, is going to be the real value of this deck. Hey, Christmas, good to see you. Yeah, the defensive tools in the set are cool. So we're going to move on to the blue cards now. And one thing you'll notice about the blue cards is that they tend to have pretty low ceilings and high floors. Blue cards in this set are generally very flexible. Blue's going to have a really high win rate to start, because the blue cards just don't really have places where they're bad like a lot of the other colors do. A lot of the other colors will have like green has cards where it's like, you can't play this in green black, it's just not good enough. You can't play this in green blue. But blue has very few cards that are only good in one deck or with one other color. On the flip side, blue doesn't have as very many cards that are like great in this deck, or great with this card, or great when you're doing this thing. It's kind of interesting. I like it. All right, up first we have an oldie but a goodie. Annul. 1 blue, counter target artifact or enchantment spell. It is an instant because it counters a spell. So this is a reprint. We've had it for a long time. I gave it a 4 with a floor of a 3, ceiling of 5, medium effort. This card counters 1/3 of the spells at common or uncommon. That's the most hits Annul has ever had. 1/3 of the commons and uncommons it has in this set can be countered by for 1 mana with Annul. It's usually going to be countering weaker spells. So this is a good card that I really want this card in my sideboard. I want access to it, and I'll usually main deck the first copy, but I won't main deck every copy. If I have a lot of looting, I'll play more. There's a potential for a huge advantage. If you get to hit your opponent's space station that they were trying to reanimate something with, it's going to feel great. And there's a lot of rares that you really want to hit with it. Very cool card. Best we've seen it. Still not something you can like pour a ton of effort into, but it's going to feel good in a lot of decks, and I'll almost always play the first copy. All right, Atomic Microcenter. Microsizer. Sorry, Microcenter's on the brain. All right, it is a 1 blue equipment, artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+0. Whenever equipped creature attacks, choose up to 1 target creature. That creature can't be blocked this turn and has base power and toughness 1/1 until end of turn. What a cool card! So this is an equipment, which means that it doesn't do anything if you don't have a creature in play, but it either removes one of your opponent's blockers by shrinking it down so that it doesn't get to block one of your larger creatures, or makes one of your creatures unblockable. So you can This pairs well with cards that are like whenever it deals combat damage to a player, do a thing, or whenever it attacks, do a thing. But there's not that many of them in this set. If you have them, there's a blue one we'll talk about soon, and there's a one in red, and there's a few cool options. Then this card is really good in your deck, but it's not inherently good. Most equipment aren't inherently good. Not giving any toughness is a knock against it. If you have the cards that you care about cheating through blockers, then the card's solid. Yes, and that's a good point, Ranger. There's also a lot of creatures with +1/+1 counters. If your opponent has a 1/1 with 4 counters on it and you microsize it, it's still going to be a 1/1 with 4 counters on it, and it blocks like a 4/4. But making any of your creatures a 2/1 unblockable creature is relevant. This is a really interesting design space. I think it's fascinating. I love this card. I want this card in an artifacts deck or with specific creatures that trigger on attack or when they hit a player. And if I don't have the specifics, I'm not very interested. So I gave it a 4 average with a floor of 3, a ceiling of 6, and medium effort. And you'll notice a lot of 3, 4s, 5s, and 6s in blue in general. All right, Cerebral Download. So this is 4 blue for an instant. Surveil X, where X is the number of artifacts you control, then draw 3 cards. Surveil is not an inherently powerful thing, but if you really need to dig for something, then... So if I just want to be plus on cards, then Surveil is not significantly better than drawing 3 cards. If I'm digging for something specific, then Surveiling for drawing 3 is the same as peeking 7 cards. I get to look at 7 cards trying to find whatever I am missing. This is a set where strict card advantage, draw 2, draw 3, is just not that common. You have to jump through hoops for most of your card advantage. So being able to pay 5 to draw 3 is pretty nice. And even if I'm only surveilling 1 or 2, I'm pretty happy. The floor of 4 is if I'm just drawing 3 cards with it, because I want the raw card advantage. The ceiling of 7 is if I both have a lot of artifacts and have something specific that I need to find. Usually I'm going to have a couple of artifacts, and then I'm going to just want some card advantage, some card selection, in which case it's going to be a 5. So Cerebral Download is 5 average, floor of 4, ceiling of 7, medium effort. I did learn, so I've been listening to the Edge of Eternities story, which has been pretty fun. It's a lot of like, this is like Alien, this is like Dune. It's very referential, but in a way that I like, in a positive way. And I learned that since these don't have faces, they wear emote masks in front of people. The jellyfish people, they wear like emoticon masks so they can show humans their displeasure. Humans are a rarity. Cloud Sculpt Technician. It is a 2 and a blue, 1/4 flying jellyfish artificer, and as long as you control an artifact, it gets +1/+0. So a 3 mana 1/4 flying, pretty average. A 3 mana 2/4 flying, solid but not amazing. Just because flying is not premium in this set. Like, flying is good, you want flyers, but you don't need them. Like in Final Fantasy, only a few things had flying. It always felt awful when their opponent had a flyer and you didn't. You had to take your flyers highly and play some weak ones. In this one, you'll still play this if you're low on flying, and you'll play it when you don't have artifacts. It's a really good blocker if you're controlling, but you don't always need a really good blocker in this set. So I gave it a 3, floor of 3, ceiling of 4, low effort. All right, up next, Codecracker Hound. This one I keep coming back to. Like, it is very good in this set. So it's a 3 mana 2/1. When this creature enters, look at the top 2 cards of your library, put 1 into your hand and the other into your graveyard with warp 3, 2 and a blue. So 2 and a blue to cast, 2 and a blue to warp. The only reason to warp it would be so you can get the effect twice. This being able to choose 1 from the top 2 cards is much better than drawing a card. Putting the card into your graveyard isn't terribly relevant, and having a 2/1 body left over is solid. If this were 3 mana for a 2, like as a 3 mana 2/1 that draws a card, very good. 6 mana for a 2/1 that draws 2 cards, solid and fine. You will often want, right, so if you warp this for its cost and then cast it again later, you're going to be really happy, but you're trading presence on board for cards. And there are matchups and times when you really want to be trading presence on board for cards, but you will often also want to cast this. It would be a higher rating if the graveyard was more relevant, but the graveyard is not crazy relevant. It can be, you can build it to be, but it's not easy like it is in other sets. And it's good. It's a very good card. Like, I'm trying to decide if I want to bump it up to a 7, but it's just not something I always want to splash. It's not always card advantage. It is always good. Like, I gave it a 6, floor of 6, ceiling of 7, low effort. Between 6 and 7, it's just a matter of how often do you have time to actually do this twice. Because I don't think you have time to actually do this twice as often as you want. I don't think you get to warp this and cast it, and that's okay. Casting it is still very good. But if you were consistently warping it and casting it, it would be a 7. If you were consistently warping it and casting it without being upset about it, it would be a 7. But I think we're usually just going to be playing as a Sig Appraiser, right? A 3-mana 2/1 draw card. It's still really good. It's a 6, and it's usually going to play at that floor of a 6. And the fact that you can... it's a ceiling of 7 because in a long, drawn-out game, being able to do it twice is relevant and strong. Yes, it is a very good boy. What a cute dog. This is the cutest 10, 12-legged dog I've ever seen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6... Those aren't arms. Yeah, 12-legged dog. This is the cutest 12-legged dog ever. Cryogen Relic. I came back to this one a few times. So it draws a card. It's a 1 in a blue artifact. When this artifact enters or leaves the battlefield, draw a card. Sacrifice this artifact. Put a stun counter on up to 1 target tapped creature. So this kind of does a lot. You can stick it in play on turn 2, have it sit in play because you need artifacts in play, and it'll draw a card. And then you can cash it in. Like, the fact that it puts a stun counter on a target tapped creature is relevant, but it's not crazy. The creature has to already be tapped. Really, you just want this because it sacrifices on demand. You can use it to trigger Void when you really need to trigger Void. You can have an artifact in your graveyard when you need to pick up an artifact in your graveyard. You can have an artifact in play when you need an artifact in play and it replaces itself. It's good for twin spelling. It's fine. If you have to stun something, it's fine, but it's not really what you want to be doing. It's just kind of does what you want it or need it to do. It's a floor of a 3 when you don't want to pay 4 mana to draw 2 cards even spread out. So it's a floor of a 3 when you don't have all these little extra mechanics built in. But this is great for triggering Void or for having an artifact in play when you need an artifact in play. March, you don't need a tapped creature because it's up to 1 target tapped creature. You can target 0 tapped creatures with it. Very cool card. And more importantly, you don't have to sack it to its ability. There are plenty of cards that say when they come into play, sacrifice an artifact, or as an additional cost to cast a spell, sacrifice an artifact, and you want them with this. Like, those cards are very good, and the Cryogen Relic makes them a lot better. So this is a solid enabler. It does a lot of good in general, and it does its job in all of the blue archetypes. So you're pretty happy with it. It's fat. Like, I revisited all the blue cards to re-rate them because I'm like, am I giving these all too similar a rating? And no. They just are usually going to play at their ceiling, and their ceiling is not usually going to be very high. Cryo Shatter. I love how creative they've gotten with 1 mana blue removal spells. Like, killing a thing for 1 mana is cool, and they need to be creative with it because they can't just kill it. So Cryo Shatter, 1 blue for an enchantment aura, enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets -5/-0, and when enchanted creature becomes tapped or is dealt damage, destroy it. So this essentially says, take a creature out of play, but not if it has abilities, and they still get to block with it once. It is bad removal. But being a bad removal spell for only 1 mana is pretty great when you're drawing a ton of cards, or when you need to cast 2 spells in 1 turn, which blue-white is very interested in doing. So in a blue-white twin spell deck, or in any deck with actual payoffs for casting 2 spells in a turn, this is a 5. It's a good removal spell. Good removal spells usually get 5s. If it's not in those decks, if you're not controlling, or if you care about, like, If you don't care enough about disabling a creature for 1 mana, then it's going to be a 3, and it'll usually play somewhere between. So I gave this a 4 with a floor of 3, ceiling of 5, medium effort. It's usually going to play somewhere between. Yeah, it handles a threat sometimes thing. The Cryosphere, but it's really cool. Like, it's just an Ichor Wellspring that can sack itself. All right, the Sculpting Blast. So bouncing is often better than killing in this set because you can bounce your own things. So the Sculpting Blast is 2 mana of 1 and a blue for an instant. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. If it was attacking, create a 1/1 colorless drone artifact creature token with flying, and this token can block only creatures with flying. This card is great. The floor of this is bouncing an attacking creature, making a drone. I need to raise the floor to a 5 and raise the ceiling to a 6. That's very good, but there's so many strong enter the battlefield effects that being able to bounce your own permanent is going to be very relevant. Like, I am really happy if I attack with my Codecracker Hound and bounce my own thing and make a drone and then recast the Codecracker Hound. So like, if I warp this, then cast it, then attack with it and bounce it and then warp it again, we're at +4 cards and a drone and a 2/1. There's a lot of value you can garner with a Sculpting Blast. That makes it better than a removal spell in a lot of situations. It can clear a blocker, it can make an attacker, so flexible and fairly powerful. Love the card. I will take this over most removal spells in this format as long as I am a tempo-oriented deck. You can bounce a Warp Thing, Alva. I won't usually bounce a Warp Thing. I might bounce my own Warp Thing. But I would like to either... Like, I would like to free a creature from a removal spell, dodge removal, reset an ETB, or make a 1/1. Like, I am not that interested in doing anything other than those 4 things, which are all pretty powerful. I gave it a 5 with a floor of 5, ceiling of 6, low effort. Divert Disaster. 1 and a blue for an instant. Counter target spell unless the controller pays 2. If they do pay the 2, you create a lander token. So this is Quench, 2 mana, counter spell unless they pay 2. And then when this card fails, it's 2 mana to put a lander into play. If you're at the stage of the game where your opponent will pay this mana, where you want them to pay this mana because you want the lander, then it's not good. Then you don't need the lander. Like, if you're making the lander, you don't need the lander. But the value of a counterspell is usually based on how likely you are to have mana up. If I am making a lot of landers, then I am often going to have 2 mana up anyway. And that way I can decide whether I want to crack a lander or counter a spell. And that functionality puts it at a 5. So I like this card in a landers deck, or in a control deck, because the early removal spells don't actually stop a lot of the early end of the battlefield effects. Like, I would much rather counterspell a Codecracker Hound than kill a Codecracker Hound, and that's pretty good early. But usually it's a like, the second line of text is not valuable for you. This is only valuable as a counterspell, and it's a good counterspell. Like, when you are a deck that wants this as a counterspell, then you want this card. And if you don't want a counterspell, ignore it. You only want this for the Quench. You don't care about the lander. So with that in mind, I gave it a 4 with a floor of 3 and a ceiling of 5. I did not account for the lander in the ceiling because I couldn't come up with a situation where I was willing to pay 4 mana for a land. That's true. Like, there are relevant ways to use the artifact, but mostly I'd rather just have a cheap counterspell. Like, twin spelling is a thing, expensive cards are a thing. Quench is relevant for a long time, to the point where I would consider raising the floor, but I think a 4 with a floor of 3, ceiling of 5, and low effort are correct. The floor might change, but the ceiling and the average score I'm pretty confident in. I think it's cool. I think it's really cool design. It's just an excuse to put Quench into the set, and it's nice that you don't lose out. The situation where the lander is relevant is with 2 copies. If I have 2 copies of this card and my opponent is 2 mana up, I'll play the first one, get a lander, play the second one. Yeah, I like this new brand of Quench too, March. We've been seeing this a lot. We've been seeing a lot of 2 mana, counter target spell, and the controller pays 2. Also, other text that doesn't matter most of the time. So like in Dustmourne, there was one that you would surveil to, and if they paid the mana. And we've been seeing it with like cycling or make disappear casualty, you know. I like it. I think it's a good design space, but it's still going to be a 4. Gigastorm Titan. I revisited this one a bunch. At the end of the day, being a 4/4 is just something that blue needs. So Gigastorm Titan, 4 and a blue for a 4/4 elemental creature. This spell costs 3 less to cast if you cast another spell this turn. Blue has so many different 1 mana and 2 mana spells that this will usually be a 4/4 that you get to cast on turn 3 or turn 4 along with another spell. That's very strong. This isn't even a twin spell card. Like, you just want it in a deck because you can cast Cryogen Relic and the Gigastorm Titan at the same time. And that's important in blue because blue was going to have, like, if you're twin spelling or if you're a blue control deck, you're going to have a lot of turns where you're just kind of dirtling to get your second spell off. You're going to be bouncing your own Cryogen Relic or cracking a Cryogen Relic to draw a card, or playing a Cryogen Relic just so you can draw a card and then also play your 4/4. But this is one of the biggest things that blue, this is the biggest thing that blue gets to do for turn 6. And that makes it important, and it makes it important to most blue game plans and powerful in general, especially if you can play it on turn 3. Really cool. So yeah, I gave Gigastorm Titan a 5 with a floor of 3. That's if you're not good, if you don't have enough cheap spells, it's going to be a 3, and a ceiling of 6, medium effort. Ideally, you'll set up a pretty big turn where you get to draw a card and cast this in the same turn, but if you draw this late game 5 or 6, it's okay to just pay 5 mana for a 4/4. Cool card, happy to have it in my blue deck, in just about any blue deck, but the ceiling is not that high. Illvoid Galeblade. I actually had this at a 6 or a 7, and I came back and dropped it when I finished reading all of the other cards. 1 mana, 1/1 Jellyfish Warrior with flash and flying, and 2 sacrifice this creature, draw a card. So cool. Like, really just a cool design space. This is a very good card when you can grow it, and the reason the rating is so low is that growing it is incredibly difficult. Blue has very few ways to put +1/+1 counters on its creatures or equip. Other cards do have really cool ways to, other colors have really cool ways to grow it, but it's just not free. So I gave it a ceiling of a 6 with some high effort. Might be not quite as like, it's usually going to play near that floor of a 4 though, where I'm pretty happy. Like, being able to, when your opponent has something huge, you can flash this in as a 1/1 block. I'm raising the ceiling. And draw a card. It's a good way to twin spell on your opponent's turn. It's a really good creature to grow, but none of that is free. So love the card, but it's going to take some work slotting it into any given deck. And in other sets, like Spectral Sailor and Foundations, for instance, the 1 mana 1/1 flash flyer, and you would just draw a card. A 1 mana 1/1 flyer was a good enough card alone, but it's hard to punish something with a 1 mana 1/1 flash. And if you punish a 3/1 attacker, like, so there's a really good 3/1 artifact that makes a lander when it comes into play for 3 mana. And yeah, you can play the Galeblade and trade with that, but your opponent is still going to be up a card because they made a lander. And it is nice that you can grow it. But yeah, so Bouncy says we need Curiosity. If Curiosity were in this set, it would be a lot better. If Bone Splitter or Short Sword were in this set, then this card would be a lot better. And those cards exist, but with work. So very cool design. Yes, it's high effort, but it's a 4, floor of 4, ceiling of 7, high effort. It's the tricks. Carl says this may be good with tricks. The tricks in this set don't usually leave counters behind. I had to go and check all the tricks. There is a white sorcery Honor. If I have 3 copies of Honor and 3 copies of Galeblade, that is a deck. Green does. I haven't finished green or red yet. So Yeah, like you can build around this, and you can build around it in really cool ways, but I do think you have to build around it before I'm excited about it, but I'm never upset about it. So that's why it's a 4 with a floor of a 4 and a ceiling of 7. 4 4 7 high. Interesting card. I kind of love it. I love it because this is the only blue card so far with a high ceiling that you have to put work into. So cool. The floor is so high because if my opponent's attacking with 6/6, I'm okay gaining 6 life, drawing a card. Illvoid Infiltrator. Yeah, I love the Illvoid I love it when Wizard nails a new species. Like when they're like, look at these new things we made, aren't they cool? And I get to say yes. Yes, you are. Like, they are so cool. They don't have faces, but they have feelings. They just communicate the feelings telepathically with each other. So they wear different things to communicate feelings to other people. And all of the rogues and infiltrators and stalkers, they don't wear the masks. The masks are like emote masks that'll be like our phone emojis, and they smile or frown to convey feelings to humans. They do have a mask. This one has a mask, but it's not wearing it. Anyway, Illvoid Infiltrator, 2 and a blue for a 1/3 jellyfish rogue. This creature can't be blocked if you cast 2 or more spells this turn, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. This is very powerful. One of the... In Outlaws of Thunder Junction, there was a card called Nimble Obstructionist. No, Nimble Infiltrator? Something like that. Whenever you commit a crime, it can't be blocked, and whenever it hits a player, draw a card. Drawing an extra card each turn is the cleanest way to enable casting a second spell each turn. If you can trigger this once, Nimble Brigand, thank you Farquaad. If you can trigger this once, you'll keep triggering it. If you trigger this a bunch, you'll win the game. It's a lot of card advantage. The floor should probably be lower. We're gonna go ahead and lower the floor to a 3, but it's usually gonna play near that ceiling of a 6. Generating a card every turn is an incredibly powerful and important thing for a twin spell deck to do. So the blue twin spell deck wants this card very badly. The other decks still want this card, but they'll have to be okay just triggering it every once in a while. Blue has a lot of cheap spells, so you can trigger twin spell reliably. Ranger says it's worth noting that this is barely a creature in terms of blocking, only attacking. That is true, but hopefully you will be able to draw into other ways to stay alive. Like, this is a very powerful source of card advantage in blue in this set. You have to kill it on sight or your opponent's going to win the game. Your opponent has to kill it on sight or you're going to win the game. And I do want to jump back. So this is the best creature to make unblockable, and it already makes itself unblockable, so it doesn't really need the microsizer. Yes, you can grow this. Growing this is excellent. I'm assuming that you can twin spell and grow this with a rating of a 6. If you can't grow this, it's still going to be a 4 or 5. If you can't grow this or cast 2 spells in a turn for some reason, then it's going to be a 3, but that's pretty rare. So 6, 3, 6 low. As average 6, floor of 3, ceiling of 6, low effort. All right, up next, Illvoid Lightjammer. 1 in a blue for an artifact equipment with flash. When this equipment enters, attach it to target creature you control. That creature gains hexproof until end of turn. Equipped creature gets +1/+2 with an equip cost of 3. This is very weak if you're using it just for size or to make something bigger, or to like make an unblockable creature bigger, but it does keep something alive. Target creature wins 1 combat, target creature doesn't die to 1 removal spell, and it's an artifact with flash. Flash has an inherent value in the twin spell deck. And a lot of decks just have a creature that they really want to protect. They can pick this up pretty high. It does all the things, like flash for twin spell, hexproof for when you need to protect a creature. So that would be good in blue white and blue red, but it's not great in blue black, and it's fine in blue green. This is much better than Starlight Mantle, yes, but removal is also not... You're not guaranteed to dodge a removal spell with this like you were in Theros Beyond Death. So I gave this... This might get bumped up. We're going to give this a revisit. So this kind of spell goes up in value when rares are important and powerful. And that's not the case for every set. So if the rares are something that keeping alive wins the game, then we will go ahead and bump this rating up. But I haven't looked at all the rares yet because I like being surprised at early access on Wednesday. So I gave this a 4, floor of 3, ceiling of 5, medium effort, and a note to revisit based on rare powers. This is true. So Carl says 2 mana up means cashing a land or protecting your card. You do get to hide this somewhat because of Quench or a lander. And I'd like this card. Like, I'll play with this card, but I'm not going to value it highly if I don't have a card that I know I want to protect. All right, Illvoy Operative. 1 in a blue for a Jellyfish Rogue. It's a 2/1, and whenever you cast your second spell each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. So this is an interesting one. 2 mana for a 2/1 is pretty bad. 2 mana for a 3/2, still not great. But if you can get this to a 4/3 or a 5/4, it's going to keep growing, and it's a legitimate win condition, on top of being a 2-drop that I'm pretty happy to play. Very cool card in the twin spell deck. But even if I can't twin spell reliably, which means I'm curving out. So when I say twin spell reliably, it's the difference between casting 2 spells and curving out. And that usually is going to be a function of number of 2-drops. So some decks are going to want to play a 2-mana spell, a 3-mana spell, a 4-mana spell, and a 5-mana spell. Some decks are going to play 2-mana spell, 3-mana spell, 2 2-mana spells, a 2-mana spell, and a 3-mana spell. And your deck has to be constructed to accommodate that. So if my deck is constructed to accommodate curving out, then I'll only get to grow this once or twice much later, and it's going to be a 3. If my deck is built to be the twin spell deck and can start growing it on turn 4 or turn 5 reliably, then the card's great. It's going to be a 5. So I gave this a 4 average, floor of 3, ceiling of 5, medium effort to bridge the gap. I really like this card, but your deck has to be built to take advantage of it. Lost in Space is 3 and a blue for an instant. Target artifact or creature's owner puts it on their choice of the top or bottom of their library. Surveil 1. Solid removal spell, not an amazing removal spell. Normally, so this card is usually a lot higher. Love it in a ramp deck. Love it in a control deck. Don't love it in a twin spell deck or a what's the other one? Or in an artifacts deck. So I think this is a 5 if I am ramp or control. I think this is a 4 if I am twin spell or the artifacts deck, but it's still fine removal in those decks, so I'm gonna play it. Tuck a creature, surveil 1 is just a good enough removal spell. Like, this is a removal spell because they don't get to draw a card if they decide to draw their normal card back. So it's still a 1-for-1 removal spell, and cool removal, great removal in some decks, weak removal in others. I love this art too. Like, you make something else lost in space. It's kind of beautiful. The flavor text is, every so often, the edge reminds you that there's always more to discover. I actually, felt guilty because I gave so many 4s in a row here. I'm like, am I just phoning it in? I'm like, no, that's the actual rating all of these cards get. Like, Mechan Assembler. 4 and a blue for a 4/4 artifact creature, Robot Artificer. Whenever another artifact you control enters, create a 2/2 colorless robot artifact creature token. This ability triggers only once each turn. If you can trigger this once, it's solid. If you can trigger it every turn, you win the game. And it is worth noting how many other cards make this better. Illvoy Lightjammer is an artifact that I can flash in on my opponent's turn. And where are you? This Desculpting Blast makes an artifact on my opponent's turn. So a 4/4 for 5 mana that doesn't make an artifact is a 3. And if you have to wait on, if you can't reliably trigger this, it's going to be a 3. But usually it'll be a 4. And if you build around it, if you build pure artifacts, or just, you don't actually have to build artifacts to trigger this. You need to build in puzzle pieces to trigger this. Like, if you are a twin spell deck and you're making a drone every turn, that'll trigger this. It's very, very good in the artifact deck and pretty weak everywhere else, but it's more about your ability to generate artifacts every turn than actually being the artifact deck. Like, I'll play this card with 0 other artifacts if I have 3 copies of Station Monitor. Like, it's just work you'll have to put in when you play with this spell, when you play with this card. So I gave it a 4 average with a floor of 3, ceiling of 7, and high effort. So March says, so Carl says, by the time you are triggering this, there may be flying things turning on, so got to be careful about this. And March says, if previous sets are anything to go by, 4/4 alone is almost good enough for me to play it. I can make a few artifacts to get the best value. So paying 5 mana into an artifact that needs to stick around, a 5 mana 4/4 that needs to stick around can happen. A 5 mana 4/4 artifact that needs to stick around is a lot more difficult because of the shatters available in this set. So like, I will play this card. You have to, in order to get full value out of this card, you have to treat it like a 6 or 7 mana spell, because you need to play this and then put an artifact into play at the same time. You don't really get to treat this like a 5-drop unless this is your least important 5-drop, because if you play this as a 5-drop, your opponent kills it, then you have to be happy about that. All right, so you don't want to play this on turn 5 and let your opponent shatter it unless you also have a 6 mana creature or a 7 mana creature that you're okay with them shattering. But on turn 7, you can play this and then put a 2/2 in. Like, there are a lot of ways to put an artifact into play the same turn you play this for only 1 or 2 mana, but then you're treating this as a 6 mana or 7 mana spell. And a 5 mana for a 6/6 or an 8/8 or a 10/10 is really good. 5 mana for a 4/4 is really bad. But a 5 mana 4/4, 6 mana for a 4/4 and a 2/2 is pretty good, especially if you get an artifact afterwards. And there are a lot of good ways to enable getting even more value by twin spelling with the Mechan Assembler. So this card is great. This is a 7 with artifacts in a twin spell deck, and it is a 3 if you don't have other artifacts, and usually it's going to be somewhere in between that, but I gave it a 4 average. 4, 3, 7 high. Mechan Navigator, 1 in a blue for a 2/1 robot pilot. Whenever this creature becomes tapped, draw a card, then discard a card. If you have space stations or things with a station mechanic, then every turn this loots and eventually might get to attack, but you're pretty happy with it just looting every turn and putting 2 charge counters on something. If you don't have those things, then you play this on turn 2, you're happy because it's an artifact creature perhaps, and you attack, you trade with your opponent's 2-drop, and you get to maybe trigger your void, or you just trade with your opponent's 2-drop. But it does stop looting if you don't have a way to tap it, because your opponent gets good at blocking it. There's even a lot of 2-drops that just block it. So it's a 3 if you only get to loot, if you don't really get to loot with it. You're not guaranteed to get to use the loot ability on this Mechan Navigator. So I have it at a 5 with stations or ways to tap it. I have it at a 3 without, and it's usually going to be a 4 somewhere between, because it's really nice if you get to attack once or twice with it, loot once or twice with it, then start stationing. So the scores are 4 average, floor 3, ceiling 5, medium effort. Ooh, Mechan Shieldmate, 1 in a blue for a 3/2 artifact creature robot soldier with Defender, and as long as an artifact enters the battlefield under your control this turn, this creature can attack as though it didn't have a Defender. So if this is attacking every turn, that's great. Like, if you are confident that you can put an artifact down on turn 3 and turn 4 and turn 5, that can happen. You can build your deck to do that. It's a good card. A 2 mana 3/2 is a nice set of stats. It's really not very likely to happen, even with a ton of artifacts, unless you also have a ton of hard advantage. But you can also mitigate some of this. If you just need a blocker, a 3/2 blocker for 2 isn't. With Defender, it's a good blocker. Like, you'll trade with it. It's nice if you're controlling and you need artifacts in play. It's also pretty good for stationing. Like, you can either attack with it or station if you're a relatively offensive deck, because it's a 3-power creature for 2 mana. But overall, none of that is guaranteed to happen. It's going to be a little bit of work either way. So I gave it an average score of 3 with a floor of 3, a ceiling of 5, and medium effort. This card has places where it will shine and be strong, and in a lot of control decks, you just want a blocker. You need that early board presence, and you won't have better options. But it's going to feel like you can make this card fine. You can't make it great. Mechanizoa. So this is a really cool one. I kind of love this. It's a 4 blue Mechanizoa for a 5/5 artifact creature robot jellyfish. When this creature enters, tap target artifact or creature an opponent controls and put a stun counter on it, and then it has warp, 2, and a blue. So, March asked a great question. I usually address questions at the end, but I think it's very good for contextualizing this card. He says, what card is this? What deck is this a 5 in? Oh, okay, we'll go back. But we're going to do this one first. What card is, when is Mechanizoa a 5? Well, it is a, this is a 5 when you care about artifacts and station. Being able to stun something to buy some time and then come down later and also stun something is pretty good. But you can warp, station, cast station, and it mitigates the cost of station. Usually the cost of station is giving up a blocker, but you get to preemptively block with the stun counters and clear the way for an attack. The stun counters are valuable. 3 mana stun a creature is not great. 3 mana stun a creature is not good. 3 mana stun a creature and station, and 6 mana stun a creature, station later is very good. I like Mechanizoa. I'll play it. It's not deck dependent. Like, this is a card that's good with specific cards, not in specific decks. It's good with stations when I'm attacking, but not as much when I'm defending. It's good with artifacts when I'm twin spelling. Like, that's what I mean by this is a puzzle set. It's about specific cards and cards that you're pairing with, not about specific archetypes. So, jumping back, March wants to know when Mech and Shieldmate is a 5. It's a 5 when I need this card. It's a 5 when it does all the things, and that's not an easy thing to do. It's a 5 when I need a defender and a station and can attack. I'd say the more aggressive or tempo-oriented artifact decks is when this is a 5, and that's not inherent. Like, it's not an archetypal thing. It's just when my deck works out that way, I can start picking these up. And I'll be happy to pick them up late. You remember Wilds of Eldraine? There was a card, there was a Merfolk that was a 2 mana 3/2 with Defender, and like that card was pretty average unless you were Mono Blue Mill. And then that was your most important blocker because it also lets you attack if you controlled things enough and your opponent wasn't going to get milled out because they had all the Forever Youngs. That's kind of the case with Mech and Shieldmate, and that's kind of the case with Mechanizoa. So it's a weird kind of situational card, but that's why it's going to play closer to the floor more often than the ceiling. Mechanizoa is going to play somewhere between more often. I do want to be attacking and stationing. So let's say out of artifacts, twin spelling, stationing, attacking, I want Mechanizoa when I'm doing 2 of those 4 things. If I'm doing 1 of those 4 things, it's going to be the floor of a 3. If I'm doing 2 of them or 3 of them, it's going to be a 4. If I'm doing all 4, which will happen, then it's a 5 for Mechanizoa. And those aren't the archetype things. Those are just things blue can do. Mental Modulation, 1 in a blue for an instant. This spell costs 1 less to cast during your turn. Tap target artifact or creature. Draw a card. The average on this is a 3, and that's because you really only want it in the double spelling deck. You are really only going out of your way to pick this in the double spelling deck. It lets you double spell as soon as turn 2. Really, turn 3 is fine because being able to cast a 2 mana 2/2 that makes a 1/1 drone whenever you cast your second spell and casts a 1 mana spell that draws a card in the same turn is very strong. You'll also be able to cast this on your opponent's upkeep or on their turn. And the double spell deck really wants spells that let them double spell for cheap on their own turn and double spell on the opponent's turn reliably. And Mental Modulation lets you do that. So I gave this a 3 with a floor of 3, ceiling of 5, medium effort. I think this is a 5 in the double spell deck, and it's usually going to be closer to a 3 everywhere else. But you're never going to be too upset when you have to include a card that cantrips as your last good spell. Mouth of the Storm, 6 in a blue for a 6/6 flying elemental with ward 2. When this creature enters, creatures your opponent's control get -3/-0 until your next turn. So I talk a lot about Honey Mammoth. Honey Mammoth is an older card. We see it a lot on green creatures. Balaam, T-Rexor, 6 mana, 6/6 green card when it comes to play, gain 3 life. Why is that so much better than Colossal Dreadmaw, 6 mana, 6/6, no gain life or anything? And the answer is when your opponent can kill your whole turn without taking their whole turn and then attack you, it feels like a huge loss. And blue has always struggled with giant creatures because it feels like a huge loss. But a 7 mana 6/6 with flying, almost good enough, but very fragile. Your opponent, you can just kill it. But the fact that this makes up for the life that you would lose in that situation, by giving your opponent's creatures -3/-0, make it a lot better. This is a good finisher for blue because it's low risk. So you also get to splash this as a finisher in other decks because of landers, and you'd rather have rare finishers. You'd rather have a big spell or an overrun to make the finishers really relevant. But attack ward plus shrinking your opponent's team means that your opponent is going to have to spend their turn actually dealing with this, and their whole turn. So like hypothetically, if your opponent has 4 mana exile target creature, that's the thing in this set, and you tap out for a Mouth of the Storm, your opponent then untaps. They have to pay 6 mana to kill this, that's their whole turn, and they don't get an attack or a station. It's just a lower risk finisher than you'll usually have for 7 mana. You have to want this as your finisher. It's a floor of a 3, but it's usually going to feel fine as a finisher. So floor of a 3, ceiling of 5, average of 5. You're going to have a lot of games where you're just at parity, trading blows back and forth, and then you resolve this and your opponent can't deal with it. They just die, or vice versa. This also survives a lot of the sweepers and a lot of the burn base removal spells, or bites and fights. So yes, landers for splashing is a thing. The fixing in this set other than landers is terrible, but landers are plentiful. So if a spell costs 6, 7, or 8 mana and you think the game will get there, if you have a deck that gets you there, then it's colorless. Because of landers. You get to play just 1 island and Mouth of the Storm, and then 4 landers. All right. This is really cool. This is a really cool card. Nanoform Sentinel, 2 and a blue for a 3/2 artifact creature robot. Whenever this creature becomes tapped, untap another target permanent. This ability triggers only once each turn. So, why is this so high? We have 3 mana 3/2s all the time. It's really hard for them to be good because they tend to trade down, and we have untappers all the time and they're pretty weak. If you have Nanoform Sentinel and another creature, another 3 mana creature, then this stations 9 in 1 turn or 6 by itself. If you have, there's a lot of cards we're going to talk about very soon, but like there's a control magic that keeps the things locked. This untaps it. This enables a lot of good attacks that you wouldn't have had otherwise. This is an artifact creature. It's very relevant. But this is a combo card. Like, this is good with stations specifically. And yes, this is a fascinating card in this set. There's lots of stun counters. There are lots of stations. There's lots of reasons things would be tapped that you want to untap. This also nets mana. Like, you can station your station with a station and untap it. You can station a station and mana fix. Like, if you have a turn 3 Nanoform Sentinel, then on turn 4 you can play a station something, untap a land. This is blue mana acceleration. This is blue ramp. This is a really cool limited card. Like, this has so many limited niche interactions. This is a 3 if you have to attack with it to use it. But being able to, this card alone stations for 5 a turn. Not literally. Like, if it stations something for 3, untap a land is really good. It's not a non-land permanent. And you can do it on your opponent's turn. Like, your opponent doesn't get to pressure point to attack through a Nanoform Sentinel. You're at least once, I'm willing to bet that at least once someone's gonna lose a game because they tap a Nanoform Sentinel with a mental modulation, and then their opponent gets to untap something different. It does, this is a good card. This is a deceptively good card. I think this card looks really bad on the surface. As of right now, this is the card I have the biggest rating difference with other creators over. A lot, too. A surprise. I think this card's fantastic. Yeah, there's so many good ways to use Nanoform Sentinel. I think it's excellent. I gave it a 5 with a floor of 3 and a ceiling of 6, medium effort. It's a floor only if you can't do any of the things with it. All right, up next we have Scour for Scrap. 3 and a blue for an instant. Choose one or both. Search your library for an artifact card, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle. Return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. This card is terrible at one mode or the other. This card is really good if you can do both modes. So make sure you're doing both modes. I'm assuming, so I gave this a rating, assuming there were rares I wanted to be able to find. If there are no good artifact rares that I am interested in tutoring for, then I don't want this. And that might, like, it might be a faulty assumption, but there's almost always good artifacts even in a non-artifact set. Even when spacecraft isn't one of the main mechanics, there's going to be good rares in the set. So this is some work. You have to be putting artifacts into the graveyard. You have to have artifacts in your deck you want to find. But if you have both of those things, it's going to be good. If you have rares to get, it's going to be a 6. Like if you have a rare that drastically impacts the board, or you can toolbox with it, like get a removal spell or a card advantage or a creature as needed, then it's going to be a 6. But usually it's going to be closer to a 4. So I gave it an average of 4, floor of 3, ceiling of 6, medium effort required. Right, I've seen the value combos at uncommon, which makes me want this spell. Really cool. Like, I like that. Tutors that are interesting to play with in limited are rare and fun, and I love that they're doing it. All right, Cellcraft Mechan, 3 and a blue for a 3/4 artifact creature, robot artificer. When this creature enters, you may sacrifice an artifact. When you do, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature and draw a card. So 4 mana 3/4 artifact creature is terrible. 4 mana 4/5 artifact creature, draw a card is great, and being able to divvy the counter makes it even more flexible. However, you have to have artifacts you are actively interested in sacrificing to want to play this card, and that's not free. There are only a few artifacts that you're like, so blue, black, blue, red has artifacts you're actively interested in sacrificing. The best artifact to sacrifice is the Cryogenic Relic. This is the best one to sacrifice. If you have 3 copies of this card, it's a 5. If you don't have things that you're actively interested in sacrificing, it's a 3. If you have a few, it's a 4. It's not about artifacts or twin spelling with this card. It's just about what you have available to sacrifice. Very cool. I gave it a 4 average, floor of 3, ceiling of 5, and it's usually going to play somewhere between them. Sinister Cryologist, 2 and a blue for a creature, jellyfish wizard. It is a 2/3. When this creature enters, target creature an opponent controls gets -3/-0 until end of turn. Warp 1. I am not interested in paying 1 blue to shrink a creature for 1 turn. I am not interested in a 3 mana 2/3 that shrinks a creature for 1 turn. There are things that have that want to break through. There are creatures where you really want to enable an attack. This is sorcery speed, so like it only enables an attack, and it's not a good attacker. It's a solid blocker, but not amazing. I only really want this in a very defensive twin spell deck, and I think that the twin spell decks are not very defensive. Yeah, I realized that on talking and lowered the ceiling. So I gave it an average of 3, floor of 3, ceiling of 4, medium effort. This does what you want it to do in the twin spell deck, but it's really not something you want to play with too often. If you're aggressive enough, I can see you wanting the -3/-0, and like warp 1 is a relevant thing. But there's just better ways to twin spell even at 1 mana. There's better ways to twin spell twice at 1 mana. I have to imagine if there are rares that say whenever you warp a creature, draw a card. Whenever a warped creature leaves the battlefield, draw a card. Or kill a thing, or make a copy. Those kinds of effects are the reason I can see for this card existing, and then the ceiling might be higher. But generally I have it at 3, floor of 3, ceiling of 4, medium value. Up next, Specimen Freighter. 5 and a blue for an artifact spacecraft. When this spacecraft enters, return up to 2 target non-spacecraft creatures to their owner's hands. I hate that text. Station. You can station, put charge counters on it. At 9 or more charge counters, it is a 4/7 with flying. Whenever this spacecraft attacks defending player, mills 4 cards. So, as we talked about blue, I highlighted lots of cards where it's like you need a station in play for this to be good. It doesn't matter what it is. You want a you get extra value stations. You can station things all at once. But 6 is too much for an enabling station. The freighter is a great way to win the game in a control deck. So I think that this is an excellent card in a hard control deck, but I don't even think the blue black is not always going to be a control deck. So when you need stations and are a control deck, this is going to be a really good card for you. But in general, I wouldn't play it otherwise. If there's ways to cheat or reduce the cost of stations, cheat them into play or reduce the cost of stations, then I'm happier with this card. Overall, it's going to be a 3 with a floor of 3, and it's got a high ceiling at 6. High effort. This is a good control card for a hard control deck, but you're usually going to want rares in this slot anyway. All right, Starbreach Whale. 4 and a blue for a 3/5 creature whale. With flying. When this creature enters, surveil 2 and warp 1 and a blue. This is like kind of the floor base of what warp does. So 1 and a blue for surveil is nice. 4 and a blue for a 3/5 surveil 2 is actually pretty good. So unlike a lot of the warp cards, I'm okay just casting this. I don't have to warp it for value. 4 and a blue for a 3/5 flyer surveil 2 is what a lot of decks want, but your 5 drops kind of need to do your deck's thing. So whether that's control or attacking, like if you're aggressive, you need to be killing something on turn 5. If you're controlling, you want you need better creatures here, but surveilling first is really nice. The fact that it's not dead off the top is great. Late in the game, surveilling becomes a lot more valuable. The later the game goes, the more that being able to filter your cards matters. So I like this card, but I'm looking to find stronger options at each point of the curve. So I gave it a 4 average, floor of 3, ceiling of 5, low effort. You'll find that this card does the job and is something you're happy to play most of the time, but that you'll often be replacing it with stronger cards, just uncommons or rares that are unplanned. Steel Swarm Operator. 1 in a blue for a 1/1 robot soldier artifact creature with flying. Tap, add a blue, spend this mana only to cast an artifact spell. Tap, add blue, spend this mana only to activate abilities of artifact sources. So this is not a set where you can just have a 2 mana 1/1 flyer and have it be good. Being able to tap for artifact spells is quite strong. If this is a good mana dork for you, then it's a 4 or a 5. If you have enough landers, then this is a 6. Like, I want being able to crack a lander every turn. Like, if I get to play this on turn 2 and then turn 3, play the 3 mana 3/1 artifact creature that makes a lander and then crack the lander, and then turn 4 play a creature that makes a lander and crack the lander, and then turn 5 play a creature that makes a lander and crack the lander. Like, there's a 7 drop that makes a lander, and being able to crack it for free is incredibly valuable. So I put the ceiling of this card as directly proportional to the number of landers I can activate. I'm not that interested in using it to equip. I'm not that interested in using... I couldn't find artifacts with expensive artifact activated abilities that I wanted to activate, so it's mostly for landers. Tapping this for 1 mana for only artifacts is solid. Tapping it for 2 mana for anything at all feels amazing. So I gave the Steel Storm Operator a 4 with a floor of a 3 and a ceiling of 6, medium effort. Tractor Beam. 2 blue, enchantment aura, enchant creature or spacecraft. When this aura enters, tap enchanted permanent. You control enchanted permanent. Enchanted permanent doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. So, the floor of this, a 4, is a removal spell that can die, like an O-Ring or a pacifism. Your opponent can kill it, get their thing back. However, you can sacrifice it, and it's yours in the meantime. And there's enough static effects that I'm pretty happy. There's also, as noted earlier, a blue common that untaps this. So every turn you can untap it. You can still use the activated abilities. You can still use the static abilities. Like if I take my opponent's station monitor, I'm still getting a drone every turn. If I take my opponent's Menon, I'm still getting the counters. And if I take my opponent's biomech and engineer, I'm still activating it. However, I can also just untap it and use it as a creature, in which case it's control magic. And control magic, if you ever remember, is really good. Taking a creature is so much better than killing a creature, and the floor of this card kills the creature. I want ways to sack it. I want to take something that I'm happy taking, but this is so good. This is the best blue removal spell we've seen in a long time. This is worth first picking. This is worth being blue 4. I gave it a 7 average with a floor of 4 and a ceiling of 7, and low effort, because it's usually going to play near that ceiling. You just need a little bit of a sack or good targets. Like, you need either a way to sacrifice what you take when they try and kill the tractor beam, or removal. Unravel. 1 blue for an instant, counter target spell. If the amount of mana spent to cast this spell was less than its mana value, you draw a card. In Magic, there exists counter spell. Blue, instant counter target spell. That card is too good. You can't play, it's too good even for standard. That might change in the future, but for now, it's too good. Blue 1 is cancel. 3 mana, counter target spell. That card is not good enough. It's not playable anywhere. Like, the margin, the way Magic cards work, the margin between that one mana makes is so huge. But cancel's always almost good enough. Like, you're really happy canceling your opponent's 10 mana spell, or 5 mana spell even. So what we see a lot is cancel with upside. Cancel, draw a card, discard a card. And that upside is enough to make cancel good. This card is good. If you get to cancel your opponent's warp spell, that's like the service level of it. Like saying counter target, warp spell, draw a card, very good. Counter spell, draw a card is absurd. Being able to cancel your opponent's warp spell and draw a card is fantastic. But this is incidentally a way to reduce the cost of a given spell, like mental modulation, and there's some in black, there's some in red, in every color. So in addition to warp, you will also find cards that are cheap that you get to cancel as a 2-for-1, counter target spell, draw a card. When your opponent does spend 5 or 6 mana on the spell, you're okay just casting a cancel. You don't always have to draw the card to feel great about it. So very good in general, but leaving mana up is not a free thing in this format. So you do have to build some leaving mana up into your deck. Leaving 2 mana up is pretty easy. Leaving 3 mana up is very difficult. So if you're leaving 3 mana up, you need to make sure you're building your deck accordingly and preparing other things to do if they don't cast a spell. So Carl says, counter warp to draw is great, but if they warp early, you get to know that card is there for later. So like that's one of the reasons that quench, the counter target spell unless they pay 2, is a little bit better, because if your opponent warps a whale on turn 2, then you know they're going to cast it again on turn 5, so you know what turn you have to leave mana up. Counter spells are fascinating in this set. So leaving mana up for your lander +1 is so much more difficult than leaving mana up for your lander. Like, it's very hard. This is a set where you want a twin spell, right? Like, if you want to cast 2 spells in 1 turn, or if you want to cast a big spell that you just warped, it gets difficult. And if I have, let's say, hypothetically, I have 5 mana and a Starbreach Whale in hand, if I have 5 mana and I warp this instead of just casting it, then they're going to be suspicious. That's not to say that this is a bad card. It just lowers the floor, right? Like, the floor would be a 4 or a 5 if it wasn't hard to leave mana up. And we've had sets where it's not hard to leave mana up. If Quick Study, for instance, that's an Eldraine common, Quick Study, 2 and a blue, draw 2 cards. If Quick Study were in this set, the floor would actually be higher. But if I leave 3 mana up, my opponent, there's not a lot of other options. It's just, yeah. So floor of 3, so it's an average score of 5, floor of 3, ceiling of 6, medium effort. Leaving mana up is not a free thing, but it does happen, and you'll get to do it. And this is a good card in general. Very strong in the right deck. Ooh, this is another one that I came back to and revised. Like a 3 Uthros Psionicist. 2 and a blue for a 2/4 jellyfish scientist. The second spell you cast each turn costs 2 less to cast. So this card's very good. It's better than it looks, and it looks solid. So you can cast this spell on turn 3 is a 2/4, whatever. It's fine. It blocks pretty well. On turn 4, you get to cast this and another 3-drop. Like on turn 4, you can cast this spell. You cast 2 of this spell on turn 4. It's not a free thing, but it'll happen. And this works on your opponent's turn as well. So you can on turn 4, just hypothetically on turn 4, cast this in a 3-drop. On turn 5, cast you can on turn 5 cast Unravel in a 4-mana spell on your opponent's turn. Like the mana this will generate 4 to 6 mana a game on average, I'd say, assuming it survives 3 turns. If this survives 3 turns, it'll generate 4 to 6 mana. This doesn't have to go into a twin spell deck to be great, because like earlier I said, okay, you have a twin spell deck, lots of 2-drops, that because on turn 4 you want to play a 2-mana spell and a 2-mana spell. Well, this one is on turn 4 you play a 3-mana spell and a 3-mana spell. On turn 5 you play a 1-mana spell and a 6-mana spell, or a 3-mana spell and a 5-mana spell. Like, it is incredibly powerful. You're going to walk past games at your pre-release, and your opponent's going to have 6 more permanents in play than your other. Like, you're going to watch a game, and someone will have 6 more permanents in play than the other player, and it's going to be because of the Psionicist. I think this card is incredible in blue, and not actually great in the twin spell deck, because in the twin spell deck, your curve's already so low. You're on mostly 2-drops, you're not saving that much mana, but in every other deck you are. All right, our last blue card and our last card of the day is Uthros Scanship. It's 3 and a blue for an artifact spacecraft. When this spacecraft enters, draw 2 cards, then discard a card. Station, and then at 8 or more counters, this is a fly. So this is a weird one. It's still not that powerful. Stations aren't that powerful, but I went through so many cards that I'm like, you really want to have a station in play for this. You really want to have a way to tap your creatures at instant speed. This is the best one in blue for that. Being able to just that, it replaces itself, and then you can then station, is great. It's not going to be a 4/4 flyer too often, but there's enough ways to crew this, to station this all at once, that it'll happen more than you'd think. You'll find a lot of the time that a station's ability to become a creature is much more about its mana value, what turn it comes into play, than its actual station cost. So there's a sharp divide between the stations that are 5 or less mana and stations that are 6 or more mana, because it's harder to find turns to station the later the game goes. So I like this one. Is a strong enough enters the battlefield effect. Like 2 mana, drawing 2 and discarding a card is nice, but mostly it just replaces itself so that you can power it up later. I like it. So I gave Uthros Scanship a 4 average, floor of 3, ceiling of 6, medium effort. It's a really cool card all around. Thank you all so much for coming. That's going to be it for the set review. Stream's not ending just yet.